So I decided I'm going to use this tank for kind of storing the Java moss and subwasser tang that's kind of taking over and competing with some of my plants. So a couple examples. In this corner right here, this subwasser tang. This tank does get some sunlight, which is probably why it's doing so well. But it's kind of taken over this Java Fern, so I'm going to remove that, and then I'm going to add some more Java Fern on this side just to have it more planted. Same thing up here. This is some Java moss. There is some subwasser tang on the other side of the sponge filter, and it's kind of overtaken this Anubias that's on the wood right here. I'm really wanting that to get going. So I think I might keep some moss in here, maybe on this side too, just to have it growing, because it seems to do very well in this tank. But yeah, like I said, it's out competing. This is a Java Fern Wendata that's doing very well, getting sunlight. I'm very impressed with it. So there's some more subwasser tang on the backside, and some Anubias. Subwasser tang taking over this sponge filter. I might leave that one as it is. Another example of moss that's gotten out of hand in this tank, but I love it when it just takes over. It looks so wild. So I think I'm gonna leave the most of the moss in here. I'm gonna remove, I think, these two Java ferns because they're just getting they're getting smothered. So I'm gonna move those to one of the other tanks. So this task was more tedious than I thought it would be. There was a lot of moss and a lot of Java Fern. Some really, really big, nice pieces of Java Fern attached to the rock there too. Very happy with how this turned out. I'm gonna start separating the moss from this Java Fern. It was just too difficult and messy to do in the tank. There is a lot of this stuff is attached to a rock, a pretty big one, and I think it'd be easier just to do it by hand in a bucket before moving it to the other tanks. But I will remove the moss and slowly add it back to this tank or one of the other tanks. I'm really happy that it's produced so well. I had so many handfuls I was able to pull from that, and then here is the Java ferns without the moss. It took some time to remove it, but I think Java Fern is just such a great plant. It's my favorite plant by far. It's given me the most joy. It's super hard to kill. You can grow it in any light, and it produces babies like crazy and propagates. And after many years, you can have a really nice mother plant that will produce babies like every month. So I also pulled so many babies from this plant. It's attached to this kind of slate rock. But yeah, and I like how you can just like move them around. You attach them to a rock and you can just kind of aquascape that way rather than planting in the substrate. I don't like the stem plants as much because I'm just not as good at it, and these are a lot more easy to move around. Yep, I still got to remove that subwasser tang. But here's like another example. So this looks like a planted tank, but it's really just all Java Fern. There is some Anubias. Anubias is a cool plant too, but I just love the Java Fern so much more because they're easier to propagate. And then I have some floating water sprite, which seems to be doing well. It seems to prefer to grow above the water, and I think that's just what I have to do with this plant. Honestly, it doesn't like being planted. So the 55 planted near the window. It is covered in duckweed, which is getting really annoying. And so is this tub, just completely covered, except for like a little hole in the back. So I need to remove this. There's some in that one too. But I'm getting really annoyed with duckweed. But what I usually do with them is I put them down in like a net and let them dry out so they die, and then I just throw them out. And that's kind of been working for me, but you gotta stay on top of it. So here's all the Java moss I pulled out of this tank. It is a pretty decent sized handful. And it was smothering this Anubias down there. So it's gonna have a lot more opportunity to grow. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to the other tank. And into the 10-gallon. Okay, I got all the duckweed out. It took a really long time, and then I got duckweed out of this tank as well. So basically what I did was I kind of pulled the floating plants that I didn't want to get rid of, pulled it down, kind of like shook them to get the duckweed out, and then removed them, put them in a bucket with water, and then took a net and got all the duckweed out by hand. It's a tedious process, and yeah, that's why people don't like duckweed. This 20-gallon tank. So I got this 20-gallon tank. I have an algae wafer and some of the shrimp, and I'm going to use this to transport shrimp into another tank. So I'm going to move them here to the next tank, and I'm just going to plop them right in here. If I can get them out of the net. Alright, and then I'm taking this algae wafer back so I can collect more shrimp, and I want to move shrimp to another tank as well. So I want to establish this colony. Since it has a lot of Java moss and Java Fern, a lot of places to hide from the guppies from being eaten. Placing it back in this tank just so I can collect more. And I want to spread the colony as much as possible. So that way, if one tank fails, I still have backup shrimp colonies. And it's good for genetics as well. Got this aquaflora thing from Santa, one of my in-laws. So I thought it was very thoughtful because I've never heard of this type of plant, an aquaflora. I did some research into it, but not too much. But basically, you just stick this structure in, and then it just grows plants. So I'm going to stick it into the 55. Focus. I'm going to place this in the 55, and so that it'll get some sunlight, and hopefully it's the best conditions for this to grow. I mean, if it doesn't work out, which, I mean, there's rumors online that it kind of doesn't work, but if it doesn't work out, I will just, attach a Java Fern to it. There it is in the tank. It actually looks pretty nice. The rock structure is really cool, and the green, I don't know if it's real or fake, but the green stuff looks really nice, especially on camera, but it looks good in person too. So it says it'll sprout live plants in 4 to 10 days. So we'll see what happens. Quick update on the aquaflora. So you can see there's little tiny sprouts that are coming out of the green kind of moss-looking thing. Little tiny leaves. So it looks like it's definitely growing. The water got kind of cloudy, and I think that's because, I don't think it was because of this aquaflora thing, but I think it was because I had someone feeding while I was out of town. And there's no fish in here, just snails and maybe a few shrimp. So maybe it wasn't a good idea, so I'm going to water change because I don't want an algae bloom. But yes, you can see it's foggy. I'm going to empty some of the water into some of the tubs here to conserve water. And maybe this tank down here, maybe some other tanks. Quick update on the nebula guppy breeding. That's one of the males I've chosen to breed with the female colony. I like the coloration and the pattern, and the body shape looks alright. There's one of the other ones. Here's a better shot at one of the males. I finally found 2 guppies that I liked that I thought were worthy of breeding with the females. There's still some improvement I could do to this line. I got it off Aquabid. I also purchased an African water fern and El Nino fern from PetSmart. Just recording how I took it out and took all the gel out. Basically, it functions just like an Anubias. I think they're both different types of bulbitis. So I'm gonna float them for a couple of days before attaching them to wood or rocks. I think wood would probably work better for these plants. That's when I got on sale for like $3 because it was damaged. But I'm just taking all this stuff out. And there's where I have it floating in the 10-gallon until I'm ready to plant.